Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Kris Sims, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, her website, taxpayer.com. Welcome back to the show, Kris.
Awesome to be here. Thank you.
Kris, a study by the Fraser Institute says the average Canadian spends 42.6% of their income in taxes. Are we paying too much and getting too little?
Absolutely, and it's something we appreciate coming out of the Fraser Institute every single year because they go through it bit by bit. So this is taxes, fees, levies, whatever other kind of weasel words that politicians and bureaucrats like to put on the word taxes in order to try to cover it up. It's a euphemism. And so when you've got that amount of your pay coming out as taxes, now add your bills to it. Now add your rent or your mortgage, there is not a lot left over. There is not a lot of wiggle room there left for most people. And so that is why we here at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, it's frankly why we exist, because we're there to try to tell government and to alert the public that we're paying way too much and getting far too little for it.
Now, they also pointed out in that study the 42.6% paid in taxes is more than the combined total for housing, food, and clothing. In other words, necessities.
Exactly, and just think of that, and especially for us here in the GVRD or Metro Vancouver, it's extremely expensive to live. Most people I know around my age, they're in pretty deep, even when they're both working full-time. So trying to get ahead is almost a kind of philosophical concept to them. It's not actually a reality. And so that's why reports like the one at the Fraser Institute is so important. Because when we turn around and go to the federal government, or go to the provincial, or go to the local government and say, you guys are spending way too much, you are far too big, you must cut spending and you must cut taxes, it's because of reports like this that shows this evidence. We need to allow people to spend their own money, to save it, to invest it, to work it back into the economy. This is a fundamental freedom as an individual here in North America. And so this is why we're here. And if people don't like paying 42% of their income in taxes, on top of everything else, as you described, they got to pick up that phone, they got to attend rallies, they got to send that email, and they have to vote with their wallet.
Is the Canadian Taxpayers Federation a political organization? Because I'm sure any government that's in power would feel, oh my God, they represent the NDP, then the Liberals, then the Conservatives, the People's Party. Who do you represent? We
represent taxpayers. So in the sense, are we a political organization? In a philosophical sense, we have an ideology, and that is lower taxes, less waste, more accountable government. So what that means is often smaller government, lower taxes, more individual freedoms, the ownership of private property, those sorts of things. Less government in your hair. So that is our stance. So people could describe that as an ideology or philosophy, but we're not a political organization in the sense of partisanship. So, for example, while many of us might have worked in politics in the past, none of us are allowed to carry any political party card. That includes ourselves as directors across the country and our board members. So that means that we need to take government actions at face value and directly as they're doing it. It doesn't matter if they're the NDP party or the BC Liberals or the federal Conservatives. If they're doing bad things with our money, we're going to nuke them. We don't care what party they're coming from. If they're blowing money, we're going to point it out and we're going to try to rally our troops. We have more than 230,000 supporters, and we're going to try to pressure those politicians to change their ways. We don't care what flag they're flying.
For example, the former federal environment minister now found to have put out contracts without tender? Is that the kind of irresponsible action you're talking about?
Yes, exactly. We can go after things like big stuff, where they're putting out major multi-million-dollar contracts without tender or breaking it up into pieces, which is a huge no-no. Or we can call for, say, a fundamental reform for transparency. So, for example, things like the Accountability Act federally, very important. Things like ethics commissioners, very important. Auditor generals, audits, okay, having transparency, posting expenses. So that's a layer, that's a tool that any individual citizen can use in their toolbox to keep any government to account, no matter the ideology. And then further to that, we go after the smaller stuff too, because that's where a lot of wasteful spending comes in. So expense accounts, lavish trips, unneeded international travel, stuff like that, panels that don't report to anybody and they're never elected, that yet they're stuffed with political hacks getting paid hundreds and hundreds of dollars per meeting, all of them coming out of taxpayers' pockets. That's the kind of accountability that we demand, both big and small.
Well, I recall former global television anchor Pamela Martin being hired by the BC Liberal government as some kind of ambassador to do something for 120, 140 grand a year. I can't recall one thing that she ever accomplished.
Exactly, and that's why we call for transparency and accountability. We should always be asking ourselves, is this good value for money? How much money are we putting into it? And what is the result? Because it's very easy for a politician to say, for example, oh, we're putting this much money into it. And then it kind of fizzles and stops, especially because, the ranks of journalists are getting thinned out by the week. There are fewer and fewer journalists working in local newsrooms. And so the follow-up questions of, oh, really? And where is that money going to? And what effect is it having? Aren't there as much as they should be. So if you see government spending money, you have a right to demand actual accountability and results for that money.
Good example, too, of what's happening with the money. $360 million a year spent on the poorest neighborhood in Canada, the downtown east side of Vancouver. Yet, any day you can drive down East Hastings Street and literally see hundreds of people living on the sidewalk.
Yes, and it is so painful to see it. It is abject human misery and suffering. And as you pointed out, hundreds of millions of dollars is flowing into that one geographical region, trying desperately, we're told, to combat the opioid epidemic, the addiction epidemic. Where's the value for money? We need to ask these hard questions because, again, it can't stop with, oh, we're putting money into it. It has to result in good things, especially when you're dealing with something as crucial and fundamental as human lives. You need to be able to see good results coming out of the investments that hardworking taxpayers are making. And this is one of the reasons why, again, we are calling for the establishment of a big, tough, effective, good mandated Auditor General for municipalities. That means that cities and towns have a place to call if they think that money is being misspent, if whistleblowers notice that government is way overstepping its bounds or not getting its act together or wasting their money. We don't care if it's in Vancouver or Vanderhoof. There should be a big, tough Auditor General, an office that they can call. And so we're calling for that. Right now, we technically have one, but it's in name only. There are like 11 people technically listed on the website, and their mandate basically says, we're here to help. It sounds like some Pomeranian lapdog. We need a team of Dobermans that are there all the time because money and power flow through city halls more and more now, and we need accountability. And the perfect example is what's going on in the downtown east side.
We'll have more with Kris Sims right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlin, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Value from success. Growth in discovery. Golden Arrow Resources is a well-funded gold-copper exploration company with proven management and prospective properties in Chile, Argentina, and Paraguay. Golden Arrow trades on the Toronto Venture Exchange, symbol GRG, on Frankfurt, symbol G6A, and the OTCQB, symbol GARWF. For more information, visit us at goldenarrowresources.com or call Sean at 778-686-0135.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Kris Sims. Kris, is it scary the federal government is looking at taxing the equity you have in your home?
Very scary, because it's one of the last little bits that isn't taxed right now. So as of right now, if you own one home and you live in it, when you sell it, you are not taxed on the difference. So what you make on that is yours. And it's been that way for years and years. Now, if you own multiple residences and you're kind of a property person, yes, you pay a form. It's almost like a form of income tax on the profit that you make on that house. So two different types of people there. So what we're now worried about is that the federal government is sniffing around and trying to figure out a way to tax you on the sale of your primary residence, the home you're living in right now. And we have good reason to be worried, because the CMHC is spending $250,000, $250,000, to participate in a study by UBC, this group within UBC called Generation Squeeze. This same group has put out reports and studies and comments repeatedly saying that the sale of your primary home should have this form of a tax on it. So much so that they call it a $7 billion loss to government, or a $7 billion cost to government. It's almost like a form of negative billing when you approach it in a taxation frame of mind. And so that's why we're saying, guys, we're going to be hitting $1 trillion with a T, dollars in debt, federal debt. This government is hooked on spending, like drunken sailors, hooked on spending. They're not going to slow down. They're going to be suddenly looking around for cash. And they're going to come after yours if we're not careful and if we don't stop them now. So that is why we're very concerned about these notions of taxing people's last little bit. That is their nest egg. That's their life plan on how they're going to financially survive in their older years for many people. And now the feds are sniffing around that.
Don't we already pay municipal taxes on our house every year, even though your home doesn't make any profit unless it's an Airbnb, in which case it's a business and it's a whole different thing? But if you just live there every year and don't do anything else, it's just a drain on your pocket.
Yeah, it's called property taxes, of course. And you pay that in every jurisdiction in BC, even if you've paid it off or paid for it yourself and built it yourself with your own hands and hammers. You'd still pay property taxes on it, because apparently cities have goods and services that they need to provide to you. Whether or not we get good value for money, that's up for debate. But yeah, you do pay property taxes on it every single year. But they want more. They're sniffing around for more. And this is where we're sounding the alarm bell and saying you have to pay close attention to what organizations like CMHC are doing, because once they're done with that sort of a study, those sorts of white papers and reports, they come back to cabinet tables. And then those caucus retreats is where they discuss these sorts of things, and bingo, you all of a sudden will have something like the massive changes they tried to impose on small businesses. These things start with these sorts of ideas and studies.
Well, hopefully this study will be treated like the Ledane Commission on Drugs in 1975 that recommended marijuana be made legal. Look how long that took to enact.
Right. It took, I think, almost 40 years, right? And that was one, and then they had several more. So yeah, governments are famous for doing big, expensive, in-depth, navel-gazing studies, whether or not they have very good recommendations or very bad recommendations, and then they exist on a shelf in the Library of Parliament in Ottawa. So that could be it, or they could just reach for it and use it like an arrow in a quiver. And right now, because this government has spent itself into such dangerous amounts of debt, it's like cornering a wounded raccoon. You can't trust it. You have to very carefully keep your eye on it.
We'll have more with Kris Sims right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Kris Sims. Kris, ICBC, the government-run insurance monopoly in British Columbia, is still collecting regular rates from people, even though there's fewer accidents and less traffic. Is this a ripoff of the taxpayer?
It's a major ripoff because when we look at other insurance providers in different parts of Canada, so for example, the private places where you have choice and you can shop around for insurance, they already sent rebates to their drivers months ago because people were stuck at home and, you know, highways were ghost towns and nobody was moving anywhere. So naturally, there were far fewer crashes, so far fewer claims. So insurance companies were saving money. Even though, you know, their investments were going down, they were saving money on that element of their business. And so they rebated their customers. One of my girlfriends who lives in Ontario, she honestly didn't mean anything by it. We were chatting about how to save money because everything has gone to hell. And she said, oh, well, my insurance provider for my car, they sent me 15% per month, backdated 3 months. Like, I didn't even need to ask. They just automatically rebated it to me in my bank account. You should phone yours. And I laughed. I said, you never lived in BC, have you? There's one stop not shopping here, and it's ICBC, and they're not giving you a rebate. What they're trying to do, and they don't want to admit this out loud, is they're trying to put out their dumpster fire at ICBC on the backs of drivers using the COVID-19 pandemic. So they're keeping that money that they saved and they pocketed because we were all stuck at home, many of us getting reduced hours or losing our jobs completely. They're taking that money from drivers and trying to balance their books with it. And frankly, if you need a global economic shutdown and medical pandemic to balance your books, you got one hell of a business plan.
Premier John Horgan of BC and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau are huddling up today. What are they discussing, and what would you like them to discuss?
Not sure yet what they're discussing. Sounds like probably how to deal with COVID and the ramifications of it. The main thing that we want them to discuss is getting the economy back on track and open and roaring again, because we literally can't afford not to. And an element of that is proper and efficient and brisk use and development of our natural resources. So, for example, the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which of course runs from Edmonton, Alberta, all the way out to Burnaby, British Columbia, which has been federally approved for about 6 years now, and which we taxpayers now unfortunately own. We didn't have to, but the feds dragged their feet so long that Kinder Morgan threw its hands up and walked away, and now we're left holding the bag. So we own this thing. We're into it for around $12 billion. It's hard to really get a grasp on exactly how much it's costing us. And what I found out, I met a guy a couple of weeks ago. He works on the pipeline line, on twinning it, in construction. And I asked him, how are things going? He said, because he's worked on both sides of the Alberta and BC border, he said it takes between 3 and 4 times longer on the BC side of this border to get the most basic permits. And we're talking basic stuff. He said, in Alberta, this thing's federally approved. Keep in mind, everything has been given green light. All the boxes are checked. Alberta, you know, you apply, you wait a few weeks, and that's it. Or maybe even a couple weeks or 10 days, depending on what it is. Here in BC, he said it takes around 4 times longer. And I was just chatting with a lady who said that one of her relatives, her son-in-law, is at a work camp, again, on this side of the border in BC. He's there. He's getting paid. Taxpayers are paying it. It's full time. He's been there a month and a half, not one shovel in the ground. So I would like Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to ask Premier John Horgan, what's up?
Well, isn't this almost a contempt of court, considering the Supreme Court of Canada has given the go-ahead to this? it's okay to start the construction. Why is BC allowed to hold it back?
This is a great question. They've been given green lights. The feds have been given green lights. Frankly, so was Kinder Morgan before this, over and over again, to twin an existing pipeline along the same route. I need to stress this, that the current pipeline is. All they're doing is twinning it along the exact same route. What gives? And to make matters worse, this would be bad enough if it were a private company that was bleeding money and being hammered and hampered all this way along, because private companies employ people really well, especially with stuff like this. You make good money in the resource sector here in Canada. It would be bad enough if the government were jamming up the works, if that were the case. But now taxpayers own this thing. Time is money. So every single hour that they waste dithering around and staring at their feet and not getting these things stamped and signed off on is taxpayers' money out the window. And we don't have it to waste. We have no more money. We're in deep, deep debt, both provincially and federally. They got to get on this, and we really hope that Prime Minister Trudeau does the responsible, mature thing and asks Premier Horgan why this is taking so long and what these delays are.
Also, we have a report that the BC government perhaps is illegally delaying and not fulfilling its freedom of information request. That directly affects people like you trying to find out how they're spending our money, doesn't it?
Yes, we use freedom of information requests, FOIs, and then federally ATIPs, access to information, all the time. And we need that information because that's how we find things out. So, for example, that's how we find out if they are delaying construction permits, or we find out what they're spending on international travel, or we find out how much the board chair of ICBC makes. You know, that's what ATIPs and FOIs are for. And we need a big, functioning, robust system to keep that going. It goes right back to our commitment to transparency and accountability. That needs to be an entire mechanism that works really well. It's a good functioning machine. And freedom of information and access to information, that's the coal that's thrown into that oven. That's how we get that thing moving along down the tracks.
Kris, anything else you wanted to add today?
Just to encourage people, if you're listening to this and you care about these issues, you are immensely powerful compared to, say, our ancestors from a couple of hundred years ago. Nowadays, we have access to politicians. We can email them. We can telephone them. We can write letters. We can, hopefully soon, go to meetings again in person and clearly and firmly and politely point out these issues. No matter how you vote or what your priorities are, if you find that elected representatives or bureaucrats are not doing what you need them to do and they're not being accountable, you have the right to speak up and say so. So pick up that phone and write that letter and go to that meeting. It really, really makes a difference.
Kris, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
My guest has been Kris Sims, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Her website, taxpayer.com. Is there a place people can contact you?
Yes, they can. They can email me directly anytime they want. It's the letter K, S-I-M-S. So ksims@taxpayer.com. You can also go to the website, as you said, taxpayer.com. My biographies are right there, and you can click on it and email me right away.
If you have any questions for Kris, you can email them to us at info@howstreet.com. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated.